This is People I Know Show, a podcast about interesting people, personal growth, and being wrong. I'm Curt Carstensen. My guest today for episode 38 is TJump. Tom is the creator of the YouTube channel TJump, where the focus is videos of Tom debating expert theologians to promote reason and atheism and debunk religious claims. That's one part of his story. And what he's been able to do to grow his channel in a relatively short amount of time is one fascinating angle of his story. And we start with that topic, but as we get into the conversation, there's a number of things that Tom has dealt with in his life and come out of that I think are very powerful to hear. Tom struggled with depression and still does to this day. Social anxiety, was diagnosed with autism as an adult, and as we'll get into, his body weight today is about half of what it used to be. Tom and I first met briefly through the Freethought Toastmasters club I'm a part of, but did lose touch and reconnected recently. That reconnection was influential to my thinking, but also Tom being a YouTube guy is influential to how I may take my podcast forward in the future. For this episode, we did record it, full video, and you can find it on the People I Know Show YouTube channel. Links to the TJump channel and the People I Know Show Facebook and Instagram accounts will all be linked in the show notes from this episode. So please check that out, and please interact with anything that you see so that I know that you're out there listening or watching. Later on in the episode, we'll get to the personal growth and being wrong segments. And Tom, as much as anyone really that I've had as a guest so far, putting a major focus on his personal growth, and someone like me that's embraced being wrong. Thanks for tuning in as always, and I hope you enjoy my conversation with TJump. Hello everybody, Curt Carstensen here with TJump, my guest today for People I Know Show. Hello, Tom.
Hey, thanks for inviting me on. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate you being here, as not often do I have video for my podcast. This happened once before for a whole one, but you have a lot of experience in this, and that's one of the reasons I want to have you on with me today. We'll get into how we met and kind of reconnected recently, but what I find most interesting about you at this moment is what you've been able to build on YouTube. To explain your YouTube channel and what you've started with and what you've grown to at this point. For how long?
Right. So I started a philosophy YouTube channel where I debate the existence of God. I'm an atheist, by which I mean I believe there are no reasons to believe in the existence of God. And I invite on professors and philosophers of various fields to debate me on those topics, to bring in their best arguments they can to try and convince me otherwise. And I've had a great deal of success. I spent a number of years researching philosophy on my own, wrote a model of epistemology and model of morality, which are what I use as my basis to debate. And I've had some really prominent professors who were willing to come on, which I'm really thankful for. And a lot of my friends and some average Joes I know debating, partnering with other channels, had a really, really great success recently with my channel.
And at this point, how many people are watching a given debate or video that you put out? And what is a goal? Like, what are you trying to accomplish when it comes to spreading the word of that you're spreading the word, or however you look at it?
Right. So I have about almost 1,300 subscribers right now. I get about 2,000 views in the first few days of my video when it comes out. My goal is to make an impact in the field of philosophy. I want to demonstrate conclusively that there are no arguments or evidence that indicate the existence of a God. So I want to really make an impact in the field of academia. I'm writing a book about it and trying to get it published. And that is my number one goal.
Why does that matter to you? Why? I mean, I'm also an atheist, and I guess it also, I feel like once I realize the truth as I see it, I would like other people to have the same realization, because I think it's been important to me. Why is this important to you? Why are you spending so much time and like most of your effort in life on this task?
Well, I enjoy it. It's really fun for me. I think that the best way to learn is by hearing the perspectives of people on the other side of the issue and having them challenge your position. There are two quotes. My favorite quotes is one from John Stuart Mill, where he says, if you only know your own side of the issue, you know little of that. And another one is from The Fundamentals of Chess, 1883, which is, the only way to get smarter is by playing a smarter opponent. So from my perspective, the best way to learn is to have your ideas challenged and have people who really know what they're talking about poke holes and show you the weaknesses in your position, which is where you need to improve and dedicate your time to try and better yourself.
Do you have examples from some of your past debates and conversations where it's gone both ways, where you have realized I'm learning from this other person who's an expert on this other side of this argument, and then the flip side where someone's come back to you and said, Tom, that this point that you've made is really allowed me to see things differently? Can you give at least one example of each?
Oh, right. I get those all the time. It happens in most of my debates. One of the most recent ones was the debate about fallibilism, which is the position that we can have knowledge, but it isn't absolute knowledge. We don't have absolute certainty about it. I took a skeptical position prior to learning about this, but through my 2 debates with 2 professional philosophers, they really brought up this as an argument against my position, which completely shattered one of my foundational arguments, and I had to reevaluate it and research all I could about fallibilism and its justifications and why it is that most philosophers hold to a fallibilist position. And that was a really big learning experience for me, that I had a lot of interesting insights from researching. And from the other side, many people who I talk to and the professors I talk to are really surprised by my approach about morality. That seems to be one that they really concede a lot of ground on, and I get a lot of compliments from. Like one of my recent conversation with Dr. Chris Gadsden, he really complimented me on my approach to morality, which is very novel, and he hadn't seen it approached in that way before.
As I find with debating, and for my whole life, I feel like I've been someone that has liked to be a devil's advocate and challenge people on things that they say. The more time I think about it, and some of the books I've read recently, it made me think that, even though that's my instinct, is to step up and give someone contrary information, I don't think that's how you either get along with people or necessarily even make progress. Like, I think something's true, someone else thinks something else is true. To start bashing each other over the head with ideas, I don't think it's a way to make great progress. What are you finding the more you do this? What really works well and what definitely hasn't worked?
Well, it kind of depends on who you're talking to. Like in some of my recent debates with the guy named Stellman, he was really open to new ideas. So I would present counter arguments to his arguments and be like, oh, I had never thought about it that way. I have to go research it more. And I've experienced that a lot, where the people are really willing to think about and introspect about their ideas when presented with contrary opinions. But it's only really open-minded, a special kind of people who are willing to do that. Most people are more closed-minded, and it's a lot harder to get them to change their position because they have taken this hard stance that, no, it must be this way and there's no way you can change my mind. But I've found there are a lot more open-minded people than you would expect, and that they are really willing to change their fundamental positions or look at it in a different way just by being presented with different arguments. But the best way, or the most common way to change people's mind, is to take someone who's on the middle ground or on the fence and present them with new information, which can lean them one way or the other. But I've actually been surprised at how many open-minded people there really are.
How would you describe your open-mindedness now and some years ago? Have you gone through a journey in any way with that?
Quite a bit, yes. I used to be more confident in my rightness, to put it nicely. And having talked with all of the professors I have and had the debates, I've learned I've been wrong quite a number of times. And I've gotten so used to it. It's relieving, I guess, because now I can accept that I'm wrong a lot quicker and learn a lot faster than I was able to before. And that has given me a great opportunity to make progress where I was unable to before.
I think I can relate. That's a main motivation to have this podcast, is how people in my life have influenced the way that I think and I act. And I've talked about it before, is it used to be such a big deal where if someone would give me information that made me feel like I might not be right, I would just try to block it off, ignore it, and find some way to be right. Whereas I've gotten so good at being wrong, I find, like, I'm very much okay. I kind of like it sometimes, because that just shows, okay, I can make progress in this area because someone's given me information that's better than what I had. And that's what I'm in pursuit of. And I would love everybody to take that approach in life, because it's been like the most freeing thing for me. Not everyone's there yet. Not everyone's probably ever going to get there, but just presenting this idea that it's okay to be wrong. It's okay to say, I don't know. Like, I don't know this thing. I wish I knew this right now, but I don't. So how do you relate to the way that I just expressed it?
Well, yeah, I totally agree. I learned this first from video games, actually. When playing video games, I'm pretty good, or used to be very, very good at video games. And the best way to learn in a video game is to watch someone who's better than you do it. Like my quote about chess, the only way to get smarter is by playing a smarter opponent. If you watch someone do it better than you and you learn from them, it makes you exponentially better and faster, gives you the ability to learn that much faster. And from my experience with video games, which is how I started to be able to acknowledge when I was wrong about things because people were better than me, I gained the ability to do the same thing in the more general context about life. When people would tell me, you're wrong. When I used to take that as kind of an insult. When people would say I was wrong, I'd get offended and get angry and upset, and I wouldn't be able to listen to the criticism or accept what they were saying. I'd just fight them and be aggressive. And that really held me back in life a lot more than I realized at the time. And being free of that and being willing to acknowledge I was wrong and adopt the new things that I'm learning as a part of myself makes me better, makes me smarter. And I really value that ability that I didn't have before.
Would you say that it gives you this different direction for growing? And I have a personal growth segment. We're not going to start that at this moment, but I found that once I was okay with being wrong, the idea of growing and getting better, it came so much easier.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I was self-dependent. For most of my childhood, I was pretty much alone and had to teach myself everything. And I got to the point where I just didn't trust anybody else. And when I started to meet people who knew more than me and I rejected their advice, I failed a lot. And when I started to accept their advice, I started to succeed in areas I never thought I could. And that was a huge learning experience for me.
You brought up your childhood, and I think our childhoods obviously play a big part in who we become as adults. Let's see if we can intertwine your childhood into your passions today. Where did you start to get into your desire to learn more about philosophy and science or religion, and how did that all come together and when?
Well, I was brought up a Christian. I don't know exactly which denomination. They all kind of bleed together. There's 30,000 of them essentially. But in high school, none of my prayers were ever answered. And I started to run into problems like the problem of suffering. Like, if there's an all good, all powerful God, why is there so much suffering in the world? And specifically my suffering was something I couldn't really tolerate.
You were most focused on your own?
Yeah,
I guess.
And that challenged my belief, and I started to get interested in more of the philosophical side. I started to look at debates from Christians and atheist philosophers like Christopher Hitchens, Sam Harris, Richard Dawkins, Dan Dennett, those kinds of guys. And I got really interested in trying to understand both sides of the issue. And after a while, I started to lean more towards the atheism, started to make more sense. And then why my prayers weren't answered, why there's so much suffering. It started to make a lot more sense on the atheist side. And their arguments started to seem a lot stronger. And then I got more deep into it, and you get to these more philosophical theologians like William Lane Craig and Thomas Aquinas and Anselm. And these guys challenge the new atheists in a certain way and try to show that the new atheist arguments aren't very good. And they do a pretty good job of that. And so I had to go even deeper into the more philosophical atheist side of the debate, who challenge the Thomists and William Lane Craig and their philosophical debate. And I kept going, like leveling up, finding the better Christians and the better atheists, and trying to find the best arguments on both sides, learning as much as I could, as fast as I could. And right now I'm at the position where I think the atheist arguments are the best. That's how I started off. It's just challenging my own beliefs and learning from people who thought differently.
As I try to make sure that I protect from being wrong and am an open mind, that I've mostly been leaning to the atheist arguments, but I have dabbled into some of the, say, Christian arguments. And I agree. There's some, if presented well, an argument is not saying which is right necessarily, but an argument presented well can very easily fool someone. Something that is not true can be presented well and fool someone, fool many, that it is true. And I come back to the side that there's not enough evidence to support really any of the religious structures that exist today. Like what back in history when this all started, did it actually go the way that we perceive it today, or the people that believe today? And I'd say very unlikely. But for someone presenting that information that it is true, there's great arguments for it to maybe the untrained mind of some of the logical fallacies that exist. Are there some that, and I'm not great at even in knowing all the terms, but are there some of the fallacies that exist in arguments that tend to catch more people? Like, what are the ones that are hardest to get people's minds away from?
Well, there's actually some really good arguments for theism, like, for example, the contingency argument, or the cosmological argument. Like, if we think everything that began to exist had a cause, the universe began to exist, the universe had a cause. I mean, that's a valid argument. It's correct. The universe did begin to exist. It does have a cause. The problem, though, is that the assumption that cause is a God. So I grant the contingency argument. It's a good argument. It just doesn't indicate a God.
Mm-hmm.
Another one is the moral argument. Many people see morality as an existing thing, like an objective morality that exists as a part of the world, as opposed to just something that's a result of biology and evolution. And there are strong intuitive reasons why we believe that, kind of like when we believe we see like the tree over there. Like, the tree isn't actually green. Green is just a result of how our eyes process things. And so, but we have a pretty good reason to believe the tree is green because it's what it looks like every time we see it. And morality kind of works the same way, as where we see and intuitively feel there's this moral thing about the world. And Christians take that to heart and believe that it really exists, just like the tree really exists. And so the moral argument is a pretty strong argument to believe that there's something else out there. And atheists don't really have a good response to that, because from our perspective, morality is just an illusion, like the color green. It's not really a thing that exists in the world. It's just how our brains process something. And so that argument for morality is a really strong argument from across cultures, because it's so ingrained in us emotionally. Like, it feels really wrong to hurt other people. It's not just a figment of our imagination. It's not just a social construct. It feels really, really wrong to do immoral things.
For almost everybody, not for everybody, as it's clearly seems to be the case, and people that study that can show examples of it. Yeah, I think when you bring up the tree being green, that's commonly known scientifically that it's colors of everything are based on our brain and the light waves and how we perceive it. And we're aware that not everyone perceives it the same, because some people have, for instance, different color blindness where they don't perceive it the same way. And it's not that the object is a different color, it's that their brain's perception of it is different.
Right. Synesthesia is one of those.
The problem is with this, and I think so many things, is the way we experience life is clearly one way and commonly understood to be one way. But yet the reality of so much is not experiential. We just have to really investigate it and create thoughts of understanding without really experiencing it. And I think the debates that you get into probably fit into that, as it's so much easier to experience life in a certain way, the way you're brought up, the way that it feels like if you say a prayer and something good happens relating to your prayer, that happened the way that I perceive it, but it doesn't necessarily mean it happened that way. And it really gets complicated. And I think for some people, maybe it's easier just to back away from it, not think about it deeply, and just kind of let it be. And I don't blame those people, but I guess for me and you, we're driven a little more to understanding it better. And you understand it way more than me, which it kind of makes me feel not that smart, which is good. It's good to know that someone's taken more time to learn more, because it makes me realize I don't know enough yet. I need to keep learning. I want to understand better what it took for you to, as you told me earlier, I asked, would you describe yourself as an expert? And you said you would. Explain why you think you're an expert in some of these things and what it takes to become an expert.
Yes, you have to analyze it from the absolute base components. What is the only thing, or the first thing we can know? And the first thing we can know, as described by Descartes, is I think, therefore I am. It's your personal experience. The fact that you exist is the first thing you can know more than anything else in the world. You can be absolutely certain about that. And then from there, well, where do you go next? Well, there's some difference between our imagination and our experience. When I imagine a unicorn, I don't see a unicorn in front of me. So there's got to be some difference there. And the question is how do we tell the difference between those two things? And that's the fundamental question of science is that thing I'm seeing really there in the world, or is it just a figment of my imagination? And trying to decide what criteria is best to use to differentiate between those two things is the debate. That's essentially the biggest question we have between a materialistic worldview and a spiritual worldview. Is like, are those spiritual things real, or are they a part of your imagination? How do we tell? And that is the fundamental difference between the theists and the atheists, is that we have different criteria for how to establish that. Where the atheistic scientists want testable verifiability. If you want to make a claim about the world, we've got to be able to independently verify it. Whereas the theists use other kinds of things like philosophical arguments and say the philosophical arguments, like the moral argument and the contingency argument, and all kinds of other arguments like the ontological, teleological, cosmological, these arguments are also good ways to tell the difference between things in our imagination and things in the world. And there's not really a good answer there of how to differentiate, like which one's really, really provably better. We don't have an answer on that in philosophy. It's not a solved question. But the tendency is to lean towards the atheistic. We need verifiable testability.
How did you come to know all these things? Like, I'd imagine for people, whether watching the video or listening to the podcast, some of the words you just used, that's like mumbo jumbo. It's not words that they've ever heard before, because for me, just a couple of years ago, in fact, some of this, the first time that we met, we can get into this in a little bit, shortly after that, you sent me a document that you can explain better what it was. It involved a lot of just really big words that I've never considered before. And it was difficult for me to like kind of get through it. So when you're having this conversation with me and the people are listening that haven't considered some of the stuff that you've considered, or you're debating on your YouTube channel, I fear that there's just a gap where you've progressed to a point where your knowledge base is at a level that some people just aren't ready for or don't even want to deal with. And I just imagine you've got to get really good at pulling back and talking in common terms. I kind of lost where I was going with that question. I'm not even sure it's a question, but that's something you must deal with.
Oh, absolutely. It's hard to do abstractly, like to break it down into the most basic terms off the bat is hard for me because I'm so used to using the terminology, the philosophical terminology, because I know the background. It's just habit for me. So there are people who I talk to who aren't trained in philosophy. Like I have conversations with acquaintances and friends on my YouTube channel as well who don't have a background in philosophy. And I have to kind of explore that with them. Like, do you understand what this concept means? If not, let me break it down for you. And I go through point by point to try and explain it better, but I don't really know how to do that innately. It's not habit for me. My habit is just use the big words because I'm used to it.
Let's step away from the big words, and I want to get a better sense of who you are. And I recently we reconnected after first meeting. It must have been somewhere between a year and 2 years ago where we first met. It was at Freethought Toastmasters as you were exploring different ways of possibly getting more debate practice at that time, is what I remember it to be. You showed up to a few meetings as a guest, ended up not joining. So at some point you disappeared, perhaps, and in many cases like that, never for me to be seen or heard from again, possibly. But then somehow through Facebook, as has happened occasionally, I came across your name or your page, or maybe I searched it for some reason. I don't know, but I added you on Facebook and invited you out to the recent Freethought Toastmasters open house, which I had a podcast about with George Kane a few weeks ago. And we reconnected there. And since then, we've gone out together one time just to talk. And I find your life to be fascinating. I think everyone's life is fascinating, but the fact that you were this person that showed up into my life briefly, we didn't really interact that much, and then I finally spent time getting to know you, and your life to me is fascinating. So I guess
I'm glad I entertain you.
Yeah, the purpose for you to exist now is just solely for my entertainment, Tom. Yeah. So thank you. And I guess in the meantime, you can do your other things that you find so important. So a few things and you can elaborate on them in whatever ways you want to or feel comfortable. The fact that you are at this expert level, and it sure sounds like it every time I hear you talk, you told me that for the bulk of about 8 years, you didn't do a whole lot except for just kind of be in your home and research.
Yeah. I had major depression. I was diagnosed with major depression for most of my childhood, most of my life. And I was extremely introverted, had extreme social anxiety. And my coping mechanism for that was just to research philosophy. It's a good distraction. And I did that for years, about 8 years.
So years, you're doing this for years. 8's an easy number to wrap our mind around. But if there is 365 days in a year, would you be doing this every day?
Pretty much. I just start watching YouTube videos and documentaries and reading philosophical papers and the debates and just go through it all day just as a distraction.
How much does all day mean to you?
Like from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to sleep.
Holy crap,
bathroom
dude. This is, to me, that's insane. I've never been so dedicated, never close to so dedicated to anything, but you've done this and you don't, do you have a degree?
No, I didn't.
From any university?
I considered it, but philosophy degrees are kind of useless because there's only one job you can get with a philosophy degree, which is a philosophy professor, and everything else is just, it's kind of useless for that. So I didn't decide to go for getting a degree.
So you found a way to learn as much as you might, or as anyone that gets the degree, they still need to put in the time and the effort. So you've done this on your own. And now with a YouTube channel with subscribers and you have a Patreon account where you're able to, at least in the beginning stages, find a way to earn an income doing what you love.
Right. I'm pretty lucky in that regard. I've had a lot of really great opportunities, a lot of really great supporters who value the work and contributions I've made to the atheist side of the debate.
I still need to try to understand this 8 years. Like, how do you not get bored with it? I don't know. How does that work?
It's better than the major depression. That's how.
Okay. So when you were in your deepest depression, explain that and what it was like to come out of it, or maybe be in it still, but be distracted in this way.
That's a hard thing to ask. It's really hard to describe how bad you feel when you wake up like that. Like I took a bottle of sleeping pills early on. Like I didn't want to live anymore. I was really, really depressed. And every day I'd wake up and just couldn't handle it. And I started watching these debates about God, and Christopher Hitchens and Frank Turek was one of my favorites. And it distracted me. And it was a good distraction. I liked it. It was not as painful anymore. And I just started watching them over and over and over again, kind of like a drug to make the pain go away. And so I never stopped. That's why I did it from pretty much the moment I wake up to the moment I went to sleep, because it was relief.
Would you say then for the entirety of the 8 years you were depressed at a similar level, or did it kind of get better over time?
It gets better and worse. It changes with time. Sometimes, like for 6 months, it can be really bad. And for 6 months, it can be kind of okay. And then 6 months, it gets really bad again. So it changes from time to time. It's not really a consistent pattern, but you never really get over it.
So how are you now? How would you compare your life today to, because I guess that's recent. That was the 8 years leading up to now, basically, correct?
Yeah, pretty much. So within the past 2 years, I've started to make pretty decent progress. I've had a lot of success in life, especially with my YouTube channel, building my social networks, getting friends who I can depend on and make me feel better about myself. I've discovered a lot of those in the past 2 years, which has helped me a lot. And I'm continuing to make progress, which is a good thing.
Yes. So this thing that led to us being together, and I guess today, I think it might relate to what we talk about in personal growth, but the fact that we went out and just met, and I think we had a lunch and a cocktail or two or a drink or two and just talked. That's something that it's fairly common to me, usually with people that I know better, but every once in a while something comes up. For you, is that common for you, or how does that fit into your life to find someone like me and just go out and talk?
Prior to 2 years ago, that would never have happened. I just didn't talk to anybody. I was completely alone in that regard. And I started doing it deliberately more recently to try and go out. Like there was a story about a guy who accepted every opportunity he was offered for a year. Just anyone who invited him to do anything, yep, I'm going to go do that. And I got inspiration from him to try and do the same thing. So anytime anyone would ever invite me to do something, I would say yes, to try and as a coping mechanism to try and improve my life and to build my social network and get out of the depression. And so within the past 2 years, I've done that a lot more deliberately, even if it's very stressful for me with the social anxiety. But more recently, it's become more common because I've been going out with more friends recently, as much as I can, going to bars, hanging out at clubs, those kinds of things.
If you're willing to talk about how this relates, and you can express it exactly, but you are one of the first people that I've met that has told me that they're on the autism spectrum. And that's something that it's a very common term. It seems to be now, like people are much more aware of it now than they used to be, but still I don't commonly come across people that have expressed to me that they're someone that is at least somewhat autistic. So you told me that the day we hung out a couple weeks ago, and that surprised me a little bit because I don't know, I'd never really considered it. But if you would explain what that means to you and how it affects your life.
Yeah. So I was diagnosed in my mid-20s. So I was apparently born with it, I think, because you are apparently born with it, and never knew about it. But it helped explain a lot of things. Like, people who are autistic have a hard time with social relationships, which I always did. I never really made many close friends in my entire life. I didn't really get the same kind of emotional relief from conversations that most people do. I didn't really make the same kind of connections with close friends and family that most people do. And I was very logical, very rational, and not as compassionate when talking to people. I was pretty like, no, that's wrong. Stop wasting my time. No, I'm not. I don't even care what you have to say about it. Completely just absolute logical and compassionate about the facts and nothing else. And that's one of the things about autism, is that you're very, very hyper focused on things and not as emotionally or socially geared to understand the emotional side of relationships. And it makes sense when I look back because of how bad I was at the emotional thing and how I had to learn it more recently in the past 2 years, and how to do all of those things and have meaningful relationships and to be more considerate when talking to people. It's a hard realization, but it's relieving in a way to know that it's not my fault, that it was something I was born with that I didn't have control over.
And also wasn't aware of. So the last 2 years, are you feeling more like in ways that you never did before? Is it you feeling stronger, or is it just an awareness of what the other person's going to feel? So then your reactions, you're able to adjust how you might interact with someone, knowing how they feel, but still kind of lacking feeling of your own.
It's probably both. I mean, I think definitely the latter is the case. And so my feeling is changing, but it takes time and it's hard to notice because it's a very slow incremental change. But I definitely am feeling better in a lot of ways about a lot of parts of my life than I was.
I think with that, let's transition into the personal growth segment. And we might be able to spend a little time on this because I just getting to know you more recently, it sounds like you're doing a lot of things and ideas that seem very important for you. But the point of this segment is that everyone's on this individual journey, but the things that individuals do oftentimes could be done by other people, and they could find something relatable in there. So I want to understand the things that you've been doing lately in this personal growth journey, what you've learned from it, and if you have any advice for other people. So is there one or two things that stand out immediately when I talk about personal growth for you?
Yeah, sure. Overcoming the social anxiety was the biggest hurdle I've had to try and overcome. And I've been researching a lot about it, looking at books and YouTube videos and guides about how to do it. And they offer these challenges to you where you start off by just walking down the street. And when you see somebody, think of a compliment. And when you see the next person, think of a compliment. Think of something positive about them that you could say. And next time you do it, like the week later or whatever, tell them, think of the compliment and say it to them and just keep walking. See the next person, think of a compliment, say it, keep walking. And then as you build up your confidence the next week, actually, if you stop and talk to somebody, just say the compliment, say, hey, you seem like a really nice person. What's going on with your life? What are you doing? How's it going? And as you progress along this model and you gain more confidence, it becomes less scary. It's like, it seems really terrifying, especially with the life where you've been ostracized mostly or from everyone around you, it seems really terrifying when you think about even just saying a single word to somebody. But as you get used to it and you're exposed to it and you gradually get better at it, it becomes easier and easier. And it's really helped me to overcome my social anxiety and to be able to talk with people.
What week in this process are you at?
I don't know, like 400.
Oh, so you've been doing this for a while?
I don't probably. I mean, I started it a long time ago, but I've just been doing the structured thing more recently. And so I'm making progress. I'm making a lot of progress, but I wish it was faster. I always wish it was faster.
So you've done this in the real world, on the street with random people.
Yep.
What's maybe the most positive interaction that's come out of one of these exercises?
Yeah, I met some really good friends who've gone out with me. We go to the bars all the time, go out to eat, hang out clubs, and they invite me to cool events and things. So I've met some really cool people.
Some of the people that you now hang out with are people you talk to randomly in the street.
Yep.
And how did that develop? That sounds, I could see it happening like with someone like me. I suppose that could work, but not everyone maybe is receptive to it. So explain this.
All right. So they have to be really receptive. Like if they're really positive about the comment, say, "Hey, thanks, man. That's really cool. I really like you," and like reflect it back or something. Then they seem open to having a conversation. Those are usually the people you want to start talking to. Not like the people who ignore you, like, "Oh, like why are you talking to me?" Don't try to start a conversation with them. It's not going to work out very well.
Okay, so as we're having this conversation, though, there are people watching / listening that might fit one of those two categories. Like if someone's like me and someone came up on the street and said something, more likely I'll be receptive to it depending on what's going on in my life at that moment. And for someone that's the opposite, that would be one of the people you just described, that's like, don't talk to me. If that person is listening to this conversation or watching us right now, what advice or what perspective, in addition to what we just talked about, would you have for them when you have that experience and someone doesn't respond well? What does that feel like? What have you learned from that?
Well, it originally it was very terrifying to have that because I was afraid of the social rejection, but eventually you realize people just don't care. It's like most people out there don't care about you at all. They don't care what you do. You can do the most ridiculous things on the street, and they're just gonna be like, what are you doing? And they're just gonna keep walking on and completely forget about you. And it's really a relieving experience to realize that people don't actually care. Like you can do most things as long as it's not illegal. If you do it in the street, no one's gonna remember. You're not gonna be judged for it.
That's something I've learned, but is it that they don't? Well, I think it's easy to say they don't care, but are they more so? They're just more so focused on their own life, their own problems. That random guy on the street doing anything is just not relevant.
Right.
Which makes them not care. But it's not that they don't care necessarily. It's that they're so focused on other things that it's just like happening off in their peripheral, and it's not a part of their real experience, I'd say.
Yeah. Well, the biggest thing with the social anxiety is the fear of being judged or being socially ostracized and being put in some kind of a container and having these like massive consequences. And once you realize that people just don't care and those consequences are just kind of imaginary, it's really freeing.
You told me that you previously were at a weight that was much higher than you are now. Can you remind me what that was?
340. I was at a max of 340 in my depression stage.
And what do you weigh right now?
180.
And this is probably pretty relatable to pretty much anyone that cares about their health, is concerned about their weight. I think caring about your health is more important than like worrying about your weight. Just knowing to be healthy. How do you go from, you said 340, you said to 180?
Yeah. What was
that process like for you, and what have you learned from that?
So I bought an infomercial exercise thing, but they show up at like 10, 11 o'clock at night with the people exercising with all the pretty people and say, "Hey, you can buy this now for just 3 low payments of $29.99." And I decided to go for it. I bought it. It was P90X, really great program. I love it, especially the Ab Ripper X is the best ab exercise ever. And I started doing that. And I started biked at my highest. I was biking 40 miles a day and jogging 8 miles a day.
Wow.
Same day. Every day that was sunny out when I couldn't do rain. Rain is terrible.
Well, what kind of a time investment is 40 miles of biking plus 8?
It's like 5 hours.
Would you do it consecutively?
Mm-hmm. So I'd run 4.5 miles around the lake. Then I'd bike 20 miles around 3 lakes. And then I'd take like an hour break for lunch. Then I'd do it again.
And these were the days that you were also spending the rest of the day then on YouTube and researching, or
Yeah.
is this a separate time of your life?
They're essentially every other day, because when it was raining out or cloudy or too hot, I would do the philosophy stuff. And when it was comfortable enough to exercise, I do the exercise stuff.
And then the rest of your day would be filled with the philosophy stuff.
Pretty much.
Okay. And how long does it take to accomplish what you have?
Well, I lost 100 pounds in a year. So just 2 years is what it took to get down from 340 to 180. I actually got down to 160, but I've been gaining weight recently, trying to build muscle.
Okay. And how much of that it was your exercise and how much was your eating habits? How did your eating habits change at that time?
Oh yeah. Diet is everything. Diet is the key. Exercise helps, but there's studies been done that if you do exercise, you eat more to compensate without realizing it. So diet is the most important thing. And I did a lot of calorie counting. That was my main way because it was easy. I like the numbers. So easy to keep track of. And so my diet was, I tried to get 1 pound or 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight, so I didn't lose muscle, and tried to keep my calories at 1,800 calories a day or lower for my size.
And are you doing the same thing now?
Yes, pretty much. Now I'm doing more protein. I want to get as much protein as possible because I'm trying to build muscle, and I'm trying to do a little more calories because I'm trying to gain weight, gain mass.
And is it easy at this point to do all these things? Is it part of your routine, or do you struggle with it and have temptations? Like, I feel like I always have temptations to not be healthy.
Well, when I'm trying to lose weight, that's when it's really hard because you can't have like no ice cream, no breads, none of the good stuff. But since I'm gaining weight, it's really easy. I can like, oh, ice cream, I can have that. Totally fine because I'm trying to gain weight. So as many calories as possible, it doesn't go over like 2,500. I'm fine.
So you've literally transformed yourself from a different person. When you think back to the previous version of yourself.
Oh God, don't make me.
You don't. I don't have to. All right, you don't want to. Okay. Okay. Well, we'll move on from that. I find that there's so much that you've learned from that point, and what else from there would go into personal growth that you think is useful to share that maybe doesn't come up when you're talking to people philosophically or debating them on your YouTube channel, but you've transformed this other way in your life that so many people are trying to grasp for some way to improve this about themselves, and it hasn't worked for them. So what else is there that you think is important?
Yeah, motivation is key. You have to find something, some goal, some ambition that drives you. For me, it was attractive women. That's my goal. I don't know if that'll work for everybody, but it's what worked for me.
So the end point was, I want to meet and have a chance with women that I find attractive.
Right.
And you recognize that at your state that was unlikely.
Yeah.
So now that you've transformed yourself physically and you're working in ways to not have social anxiety and being better with people. We've talked about this a little bit previously, but how is that going?
Well, surprisingly well.
Like what's well?
Little personal.
Okay. Well, that's what people like to know about, Tom. But that's good news. Good to hear. And I didn't do it the same way. We all have our own experience, but I used to be awful, like trying to talk to women, I didn't know what, if someone I found attractive or appealing and I like wanted to talk to them, I wouldn't know what to say. What I would say would be stupid. I'd worry about everything so much. And in time, I find that if the goal is to attract someone that you want to have in your life, first off, improving yourself, like really being able to demonstrate to yourself and to other people that I am working on these things. I'm doing great in all these areas. And honestly, doing that is important, but also just being confident enough to feel comfortable in the presence of people you don't know very well. And when that person happens to be someone that you like to know better based on whatever is going on in your body, and you're feeling like, yeah, this is someone I might like, that's all that doesn't come together quickly. I don't know that anyone's really naturally good at that. Some people seem to be, but I think it all just takes time and skill. And it seems like that's just one of the areas that you're focusing on, and it sounds like you're getting some results based on the way you've just reacted.
Yeah.
Is there any more personal growth things that you're doing? I think there's some that you've told me about.
Well, I'm not sure, because the exercise, the body stuff, the social anxiety, my philosophy stuff, I mean, that covers a lot. I'm not sure what else there would be.
The one thing that you mentioned earlier before we started recording is you have tonight, it happens to be Wednesday as we record this, but you have dance.
Oh, right. Yeah, there's a lot of hobby things I'm doing. I'm doing improv class, dance class, trying to learn rollerblading, photography, starting my own website for my philosophy stuff and my photography stuff, archery, bunch of hobbies. I'd like to learn all the kinds of dance, salsa, swing, tango, flamingo, waltz, ballroom, Latin, pole dancing.
Let me know when that class is, Tom. As you describe all these things you're doing, I get the sense that where do you find all this time? But then I realize through your 8 years of being a self-taught expert in an area that you now can go out publicly on YouTube and earn enough income so that you don't have to like go to a job for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, like a lot of people do, like I still pretty much do. It allows for all this time. So that is, I think I'm striving for that. I would like my podcast to grow to a way where I can work less in other areas, but you're doing that. And it seems like your life is improving and improving because you have this time to pursue things that you either enjoy or know that are good for you, but you have the time to do it, it seems like.
Yeah, that's a really important aspect. The fact that I was lucky enough to find as much success as I have in YouTube, and I have so many just really great supporters who value what I'm doing to support me financially, is absolutely amazing. I can't believe how much and how generous the people who I'm associated with have been to my channel. It's really liberating that I have that much free time now because of the financial support they're giving me to be able to explore and improve myself and develop in life.
And I got to believe that by developing all these other areas of your life and being better with new people, random people, all these different situations, when it comes to debating and expressing your understanding of information to whoever's over on the other side of the debate or the people that are watching you, everything's going to become more relatable. Like life just becomes more relatable to what you've learned. And I think as you do that, you're going to be able to adapt to connecting with more people more easily, more quickly, and just better.
Yeah, I hope so. I think that's probably happened, because when I started off doing my early debates, I was probably not as personable and not able to relate and communicate my ideas as clearly as I can now. I think it's a lot easier, and I've gotten a lot better at it with the practice that I've had, especially in the social realm when it's not related to philosophy. Just being able to communicate better with people has helped me a lot to be able to express my positions even in the philosophy stuff.
I think all that you're describing about your life is very influential, and that's an important concept for the podcast, especially lately, is that people have influenced my life. You directly haven't necessarily influenced me a ton yet, but I imagine we will. But just the fact that we reconnected, that's a thing that I find influential in the way that I got to keep my eyes open for people that I've come across that I didn't give a lot of time to, that could have great value in my life. And I see that you can be one of those people. And for you, perhaps I can be that as well. And just the fact that we all can be influential in regular, everyday people's lives that we come across. And we need to be aware that these people that are kind of on the background of our existence, that let's bring some of them to the foreground and see what we can do. So that's...
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate the compliment, and I hope I can be as beneficial to your life as you are to mine as well.
That's great. Lastly, the final segment of the show is the being wrong segment. And as we've talked about earlier already, I feel like I am wrong a lot, and I embrace being wrong. And it seems like you do as well. And the purpose of this segment is to just relate to who's ever out there watching and listening that we all can be wrong. We all can make big changes in the way that we think. And I want to hear from you, Tom, as we've gone through this conversation. When I ask you what you've been wrong about, definitely been wrong about, that what you think is worth sharing, what comes to mind?
Definitely the stuff I mentioned before about being afraid of social consequences. They're not really that big of a deal. I was always under the impression that there was this huge risk of social engagement when you engage with other people, of being judged and being socially ostracized. And I was totally wrong about that. It doesn't exist. You have a lot more freedom to be able to express yourself and even do weird things that people wouldn't care about or wouldn't care for. And most people just aren't going to care. It's not going to really have that much of an impact on you. And so you should be really more adventurous in what you do. Some of the other challenges that are a part of the social anxiety workshop things I've been watching are just to do embarrassing things while you have conversation with people. Like just go up and have a conversation with somebody, just start picking your nose right in the middle of the conversation. Just wipe it off on your shirt. It's just do funny stuff like that, and it's just really no big deal. Like they're going to be weirded out, but it doesn't matter. It's like nothing happens.
And then from that, you can just keep doing more weird things. I think for me, a relatable thing is I've never been a confident singer. Like I think I don't sing well. And when I'm around people, almost anybody, I would be hesitant to sing because of that. And now I realize it doesn't matter. I can be a crappy singer just like everyone else that's a crappy singer. And it really does. I don't know if that matters anyhow. Just expressing like emotion through song is something people can really enjoy and relate to and benefit from. So I've stopped concerning myself with who's listening to me when I'm singing as one of many things that I've done, not concerning myself with what other people might think and having that be a reason to stop me from doing it. When I had the podcast, I used to really care what people might think. Now you do enough repetition of putting stuff out to the world that people are listening to or seeing, you realize, you know what? It's probably okay. No one cares that much. People that don't care. And the people that do, there's people that you can connect with and really find it valuable. And those are the people that I'm more concerned about anyhow. Yeah,
definitely. There's one of the things that I learned from the social anxiety thing is that if there's something that causes you anxiety, you should do it. Like you should just go for it because it causes you anxiety. And doing that has really helped me a lot. Like singing in public was something that was really awkward for me too. And so when I was biking around the lake and running around the lake, I just started singing with my YouTube or my iPod songs, Frank Sinatra, like Fly Me to the Moon and stuff while I'm jogging around the lake, and all these people would look at me weird, and I'd just like, yeah, okay, hey. And it's just totally fine. And it's nice to know that there's those consequences aren't actually there. Those social consequences don't really matter, except for a few things you got to worry about. But
does singing Frank Sinatra or while running around a lake attract women that you're interested in?
I don't think so.
I don't think it would either, but that's okay. I think the skills you're learning by not being concerned about being yourself will then attract women later on. That's my hunch.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts from you, Tom?
Well, yeah, thanks again for inviting me on your show. I really appreciate it. Thanks for being a good friend and going out to the bar with me. That was a really good kimchi burger, by the way. Surprising combination of ingredients.
If someone's interested in the kimchi burger, that was at the Poorhouse in uptown Minneapolis, where we went out a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tom, for joining me. And I'll put it all in the show notes, but one plug from you specifically about your YouTube channel for people to go check it out.
Oh yeah. I have a YouTube channel called TJump, TJump. It's where I debate and mostly religion, the existence of God and stuff, but I also do politics. I do gun debate, the wall debate, Trump's wall debate, abortion, that kind of stuff. I have a lot of really interesting opinions, and you should come check it out and then yell at me if you don't like me.
He's okay. He's okay with being told that he's wrong, I think. I appreciate your time, Tom. Thanks. Thank you for listening to People I Know Show. Links are in the show notes for the People I Know Show Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube accounts. Reminder, full video of this episode is on YouTube. Also links there to find the TJump YouTube channel. Be sure to check out some of the debates that he's had. I like your feedback. Please comment anywhere you're connected with People I Know Show online. Remember to subscribe to the podcast on your favorite app. Leave a review on Apple Podcasts. Or, as always, you can send an email to me, Curt Carstensen, using the email address peopleiknowshow@gmail.com. Thanks for listening.